Hi, welcome to Edward Box Guitar Tuition. So today I've got a classic album inspection. It's 50th anniversary of Budgie's third album, Never Turn Your Back on a Friend. So what is it? Budgie formed 1968, and they're one of the early precursors and innovators of heavy metal in the UK. Obviously heavy music really starts properly in the UK with Led Zeppelin with their first album, particularly their second. Obviously, Led Zeppelin don't like being associated with metal, but anyway, those heavier tracks are certainly an influence. And then you get Black Sabbath, Deep Purple finally finding their sound within rock, and Uriah Heep with Very Heavy, Very Humble. All 1970. Budgie's first album comes out in 71, which is actually a really good debut. It's produced by Roger Bain, who produced Black Sabbath and Judas Priest, amongst others. Then they do Squawk, which is probably not as good, still got some good tracks. And then they come to Never Turn Their Back on a Friend in 1973. And this begins a run of 3 albums. There's In for the Kill in 74. And in 75 we have Bandolier. And these are probably like the prime Budgie albums. So what's Budgie sound like? I mean, there's certainly your heavy rock. There's certainly a heavy blues influenced band. Some of the tracks certainly kind of touch base with the same kind of heaviness that Black Sabbath would have and Judas Priest would later have. So although not strictly metal, there's certainly an influence, and of course Metallica covered Bread Fan and Crash Course in Brain Surgery. Crash Course in Brain Surgery I think is off the In for the Kill album, I'm just checking, yeah. So the In for the Kill album's got In for the Kill, Crash Course in Jake, Brain Surgery, Soon Come Hammer and Tongs, which are really good tunes. And Bandolier, the album after's got Breaking All the House Rules, I Can't See My Feelings, Ain't No Mountain, and Napoleon Bonaparte's 1 and 2. It's a great track, that. So I think in some way it's fair to say Budgie maybe never made a definitive album, but they never made a kind of bad record. All their albums, it's 76 to do If I Britannia Obey the Rules, and 78 Impeccable. They changed their sound a bit, a little funkier, feeling like more new wave influence, but still good. And then they got like what I call the New Wob and Bounce in 1980 with their album Power Supply. So the New Wob and Bounce is when you get the new wave of British heavy metal. You get all the new metal bands, New Wob and bands starting up, and that influenced all the bands that came before. The fans get into New Wob and bands and they discover the old bands and vice versa. So Judas Priest, Budgie, Black Sabbath, all got a New Wob and band. Scorpions, when we got into metal back then, we went back and bought all the back catalogue AC/DC as well. So Budgie, we had the Best of Budgie, which is, I forget which year that's released. I think it comes to probably like late 70s, which is a good compilation. The Power Supply was good. In fact, then the Night Flight, Deliver Us From Evil, they've all got good songs on. Later on they did a comeback album with You're Living in Cloud Cuckoo Land. There's some I should mention, Budgie have really funny, witty song titles, which kind of sets them apart from the metal crowd, or the heavy crowd. But I suppose at the same time, the song titles aren't very heavy sounding. Obviously, In for the Kill is a heavy sounding thing, but so it makes them more quirky. Let's just have a look at this album anyway, because I've waffled a bit. It's recorded at Rockfield Studios, a very famous studio. Queen recorded there, Simon & Destiny's recorded there. Budgie produced themselves on this, and it's bookended really by probably Budgie's 2 greatest tracks. Certainly the opening track is the most famous track, and it's Bread Fan. It finished with a track called Parents. Bread Fan's got a great riff. And when you listen to that, you really hear the attack on Tony Borg's pick. It's really good, and it comes in, and it's a hard driving track. The first thing you notice is the quirkiness of Burke Shelley's voice, and I think this is where Budgie, there's always that argument, bands, people who are fans of the band go, why wasn't this band huge, why weren't they massive? And I think, I like Budgie, I'm not a massive fan, but I do like him, so I think maybe that gives me a way to look at it a little bit more objectively. It's like, Burke Shelley's voice is very quirky, it's quite thin and reedy, it's got a bit of balls, it's got a bit of blues in it, but you would sort of compare it to Geddy Lee in the sense that it's kind of a little high frequenced. The difference in Geddy Lee's kind of got that Robert Plant shriek, and Rush, their music goes a different way. I'm comparing 2 3-piece bands, but I think the main thing is you can't really compare Burke Shelley's vocals, and I would call them vocals, to the singing of David Byron and Uriah Heep, the singing of Ian Gillan and later Coverdale, and the singing of Robert Plant. Ozzy, I would call a vocalist rather than a singer, but that's difference I think with Ozzy compared to Burke Shelley. Ozzy's got a little more balls in his voice. He's got sort of a bit of guttural rage. You know, there's howls he does on Black Sabbath, and also Ozzy's voice is quite psychedelic, and with Sabbath stoner rock sort of sound at times. I think that kind of gives him a better spread. He's kind of like a metal John Lennon, isn't he, a bit, Ozzy? So that's the difference. I think there's not criticism of Bert Shelley. He's got an interesting voice. It makes his band stand out, but it's not an all-time great metal or classic rock voice. He hasn't got that. He hasn't got Paul Rodgers, you know, those kind of guys, you know. Okay, so that's it. The rhythm section. Tony Ball's guitar's good. He's a good guitarist. He's not a great guitarist. He hasn't got a standout guitar style like Blackmore or Jimmy Page or Tony Iommi. Obviously, Mick Box has got his quirky wah-wah. Although I think Tony Ball's maybe a more tasteful lead player. Drums by Ray Phillips. Again, they're solid, perfectly decent, but he's not Ian Pace. He's not Lee Kerslake. He's not John Bonham. And he's not Bill Ward. You know, he's not up there with those guys. So, you know, in terms of like individual players, Budgie aren't as they're not as star strikers, you know, or creative midfielders kind of thing as those musicians in other bands are. But they've got good chemistry, they're a good unit, and they make an interesting sound, and that's why they've got a following. So anyway, Bread Fan's got a really nice jazzy sort of middle section here. There's sort of Sabbath influence there, I guess. Interesting lyric as well. It's about money. Bread Fan, bread is slang for money in the UK. So it's quite an interesting lyric, you know, and quite one that people should listen to today, really. Then they do a cover of Baby Please Don't Go by Big Joe Williams. So obviously AC/DC did this. When I listened back to the album at first, I was kind of like, oh, cover of Baby Please Don't Go. But it's actually pretty cool. It's a good arrangement. There's quite an interesting thing on this album. There's quite a lot of interesting panning on guitars. So they make quite good use of the stereo spectrum. You know, Tony Borg will play a bit of a riff or a lick in one speaker, and then he'll answer himself in the other. Bass is kind of got a bit of clank, bit of balls. Drums have got a massively powerful sound, but they're there. So it's a good version. Then You'll Know I Always Love You. So this is like a kind of folky ballad. And again, it's quite nice. It kind of brings out a different quality of Bert Shelley's voice. Again, sort of typical of what bands would do then, you know. They tend to have longer tracks and put in these sort of quirky, shorter tracks. And every band was doing it, you know. Priest did it on Prelude, the track of Sad Wings. They did it on Rock and Roll on a few tracks. Sabbath had those little instrumentals. And Budgie the same. This is the first of one of these types of tracks. So it's quite a nice little interlude. And then the last track on side one of the original album is You're the Biggest Thing Since Powdered Milk. So that shows Budgie's genius, I was saying before, these crazy song titles that are really funny, really witty, but again, not typical of the genre. I should point out that the album artwork for this has got a great Roger Dean album artwork. So again, it's fitting in with that fantasy album artwork that Uriah Heep used on Demons and Wizards, Magician's Birthday. Priest would later exploit on Sad Wings, Patrick Woodruff and so on. But the song titles are kind of just more, you know, not keeping with the image of that. And Budgie's quite a weird name, I suppose. I love the Budgie logo, always did. There was a great logo. But it's quite weird calling an album Budgie or a heavy band. You know, obviously there's actually a TV show in the UK called Budgie with Adam Faith. That's a different story. But it's not a very metal sound, you know. It's not like Hawk or a Talon or something like that. Okay, so and those track lengths, you know, it's 6 minutes for Bread Fan, just over 5 minutes, Baby Please Don't Go. You'll Always Know I Love You is 2 minutes 12, and then Your Biggest Thing Since Milk, You're the Biggest Thing Since Powder's Milk is 8:45, and I think You're the Biggest Thing Since Powdered Milk starts with a drum solo as well. I haven't listened back. It might be the next track, but I think it's that one. So it kind of actually has almost 2 minutes of just drum solos, a lot of panning and that. And that's a bit fillery. It's ready to fill up the album. The album's 41 minutes 29. So that's a great track, but probably that could do without that. So side 2 starts with another great title, and this is like another one of Bush's really classic tracks, and it's In the Grip of a Tire Fitter's Hand. What a great title. This is 6:18. This has got a really dirty riff. It's heavy. One of the heaviest tracks. You know, this is, along with Bread Fan, this is kind of their metal appeal, I guess. 6 minutes 18. Really cool track, really good guitar, bass, great. And then you got Riding My Nightmare, and again, this is another quirky little acoustic number. It's weird, the vocal harmonies on this is slightly out of tune. but it kind of adds a certain quality to the track. I quite like it. So again, it's just like a little pleasant interlude track. And then the album finishes off with their epic. This is 10 Minutes 10 His Parents. This is really good. Again, it's got a strong lyric. I think the guitar on this is excellent by Tony Borg. He really comes into his own on this. It's got a nice kind of jazzy descending bass line. Musicians will know, you play A, you play G sharp, you play G, you play F sharp. It's like the stairway thing. But Tony Borg develops this really nice melody line. Plays the change lovely, kind of develops that through the octaves and dynamically. And the bass and the interplay on this is really good. Yeah, it's a great track. So, it finishes on a famous track. Sort of looking, like I said, later on, the two Budgie albums after this have really good tracks on as well, and are probably as good. I mean, I'd give this album, Never Turn You Back on a Friend, an 8 out of 10. So I think it's a really good record. I don't know if it's a classic album. I don't know if it's got enough, but Budgie Williams Bands used to have like a big compilation of Budgie, and that kind of put together all the tracks you kind of needed. Others would disagree with me, but again, if you look at their other albums, they tend to have 3 or 4 really, really cool tracks, but it's not sort of consistently great. But they're one of those bands on the radar, like I say, when the new album happened, and people getting into metal again. Budgie, they played the Reading Festival. Later on, they changed lineup. They got a Steve Williams in on drums and the guy called Big John Thomas in on guitar. And he was kind of more like a Billy Gibbons player with a little bit of Van Halen. And he actually updated the sound and got a bit more, boogie-ish into them. Because they kind of had, a bit of a lean spell, really. They never really got popular. I think the highest chart place they never had in the UK was about 36. But they're popular in parts of Europe and around. When they did the Power Supply album, that again got them a bit of traction. And they changed label for that. I should mention that they were on MCA Records as well, which I think was a disadvantage for them. MCA's terrible with rock and metal notoriously. People call Music Cemetery of America. So I don't think that helped. And later on they went to RCA Active, which is a division of RCA label. Again, RCA's not great with metal. If they've been on an EMI, a Warner Brothers subsidiary, Vertigo, who knew how to market this music better, that might have kind of helped them a bit. Night Flight and Deliverance from Evil, the last sort of couple of albums in their main period, were probably their going more commercial, and that gave them some success. And that's some good tracks. And the last, so I'm just going through live here. The last album was called You All Live in Cloud Cuckoo Land, which is a great title. By then had Steve Williams still on drums, and Simon Lees took over on guitar, great guitar player from Birmingham who played with Al Atkins. And they kind of went out on tour and did the Heritage Circuit, but unfortunately Burke Shelley passed away recently and he'd had health problems, so they couldn't carry on. But anyway, that's a little escape through that. Budgie, definitely an influence on metal. Again, I forgot to mention as well, sorry, they used to tour with Judas Priest as well. You can hear jams online of the two bands playing live. And an important part of the evolution of heavy metal. Never quite joining the first league, but definitely in the upper echelons of the second division. Well worth checking out. Okay, I'll see you again for another inspection soon. Thank you very much.